Booksy, welcome back to my channel. At the beginning of the month, I've been posting a video where I show you the books that I'm planning to read or tell you about the books that I'm planning to read during that month. And at the end of the month or somewhere in the progress of the next month, I've been doing a little look back, revisiting my monthly TBR for the previous month and seeing how my monthly readings stacked up against the books that I had planned to read. Quite often, my monthly TBR is very ambitious. For the last few months, I have put somewhere close to 30 books on my reading list for the month. And no month that I have set a 30 book TBR have I read 30 books. I can't remember the last time I read 30 books in a month. I don't know if I've ever read 30 books in a month, but it hasn't stopped me from creating these monstrous TBR stacks. And while I don't necessarily read all the books that I plan to read, I also find that during the month, I read other books that weren't necessarily on my radar at the beginning, and books that I hadn't planned to pick up. I found myself gravitating towards them and enjoying the process of feeling a little bit of freedom to choose the books, even though I have such rigid plans already set out. The plans are not rigid. Anyway, today we're here to do my monthly TBR revisit. So today is April 7th. So we're gonna have a little look back at my March TBR. And we're gonna see how many of the books that I had planned to read in March that I actually read. Now I haven't rewatched the video myself yet, so I don't remember all the books that were on my March TBR, but I did take out some of the books that I remember that I had set aside in March to read. And so I remember that there were definitely Man Booker books that I had taken out from my previous Man Booker challenge. There's my book club book. There were books that I had from the library that I wanted to read before they were due for renewal. There were a few books that I'd gotten from publishers to review that I know I needed to read in order to post some kind of a review during the month. And other books that I just kind of set aside. So I've taken out a stack of books here. And so I'll be able to tell you whether I've read those books when they come up in the video. But I definitely don't have 30 books here, even though I know that some of them were electronic copies. But we'll see when they come up. So stay tuned for my March TBR revisit. Let's watch this together. Hey there, Booksy, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my March TBR video. These are some of the books that I have my sights set on to read during March. Okay. And at the end of the month, we'll come back and we'll see whether I read some of them or all of them. All of them. Or none of them. While I didn't quite stick to my TBR plans in February, I was quite fine with that. And I'm allowing myself that freedom this month as well. I have about 20 books that I have set aside that I'm thinking about reading during March. 20? And if I read most of them, that will be great. But if I don't read them, and it's because I'm reading books that are a little bit more relevant to me during the month, I'm fine with that too. But let's start with the plans before we start thinking about how we're going to not follow the plans. That's a good idea. The first book that I'm going to be reading, that I'm sure I'm going to be reading in March, is one that I've told you about before. It is Gandhi, The Years That Changed the World. This is 19... So Gandhi, The Years That Changed the World. No, we didn't finish reading this book in March, but we started. I'm doing a buddy read of this one with my husband. He is a history buff, and this is a history book. It's about the life of Mahatma Gandhi. And so while I could probably have pushed forward and read this entire book in March, if I was reading it by myself, maybe I would have. I mean, this is not really the kind of book that you spend an entire day or two just reading, but it's important for us to read it and be able to talk about what we're reading. So we kind of want to stay in the same place, in the same part of the book, the same section of history that we're reading. So right now we're close to around page 200. I don't know when we'll finish this book if we continue at that pace, but it's going a little slower than we had thought. I mean, I have a lot more time to read than my husband does, but he does have a break coming up, and maybe the goal will be that we'll try to get as much of this read during that week that he has off for spring break. So we started, but no, we didn't finish Gandhi in March. Other books that I have, most of these are books that I got from the library, so I'm gonna try to see how many of them I can read before they're due back. I have Less by Andrew Sean Greer, which is a 2018 Pulitzer Prize winner, and Less by Andrew Sean Greer, I read it. I've already returned it to the library, so I don't have a copy to show you, but yes, it's one of the first books that I read in March, and I absolutely enjoyed reading it. I don't remember that I loved it. Um, what did I rate that book? I gave it a 3-star rating. There were some things about the book that were a little confusing to read, but I read it. We'll talk a little bit more about it when I get to a review. I also have Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan on my TBR. I'm reading this for a challenge where I need to read Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I did read. I found this one interesting and fun and engrossing, but there were also some things about this book that I didn't love, and so I did end up giving this a 3-star rating. But I was also glad that because it's set in Singapore, I was able to cross or add Singapore to my list of countries that I visited in 2019 through books. Hashtag World Traveler. I also have The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. I didn't read this in March, but it's my current read in April, so I'm gonna say that I read this, just not in March. I started this book in February. I didn't get very far. I was reading too many other books to really spend the time that I want to spend with Miss Tony. And so I decided to push it, even though I was so excited to read this book. This is The Source of Self-Regard, Selected Essays, Speeches, and Meditations. The Source of Self-Regard is a collection of Toni Morrison's essays, and I started reading it in February. I continued reading it in March, and I'm still not finished, but I did have to return it to the library. It's a book that I'm probably going to purchase my own copy because I want to own that book. It's like I said, it's a collection of her essays. Some of them have been published in other places, and so you'll find a lot of her thoughts being repeated throughout the different essays. But it was interesting. It's interesting to hear or to read what Miss Morrison's thoughts are on a lot of social issues. And so it's a book that I'll continue reading as I've started it, but even though I'm not finished, I'm going to say that I read it for the purposes of this revisit because it's not a book that I think I want to read quickly. Also picked up The Half-Brother by Lars Saabye Christensen. This is a Norwegian writer. And The Half-Brother by Lars Saabye Christensen. I didn't even open this one. It's been recommended to me by someone. It's a huge book, almost 700 pages. No, I haven't read it yet. But to break that up, I also have these graphic novels that I'm looking forward to reading. I have Persepolis, The Story of a Childhood. Yes. By Marsha and Satrapi, as well as the 2 of the 3 books that are in this series, The Arab of the Future by Riyad Satrapi. I now have all 3 of them, and I read them. Other books that I'm going to show you that I don't know if they're going to be in March or they're going to be in April. Books that I got from the library. The Overstory by Richard Powers. I didn't read The Overstory by Richard Powers. I had to return it to the library, so no to that one. This Girls Burn Brighter by Shobha Ray. Girls Burn Brighter by Shobha Rayo. I still have it. I haven't read it yet. My Husband's Wife by Jane Corey. My Husband's Wife by Jane Corey. I didn't read. I still have it out from the library. At some point I will get to this book, hopefully. How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. I actually read this one for the Buzzword Readathon 2 weeks ago. If You Leave Me by Crystal Hannah Kim. If You Leave Me by Crystal Hannah Kim. I still have this from the library. I haven't read it yet. And Love and Ruin by Paula McLean. All of those are books that I have out from the library. Love and Ruin by Paula McLean. Still have it from the library. No, I haven't read it yet. Wow, this looks really bad. I also have Man Booker books. I have, I think, 6 Man Booker books that I need to read in March so I can catch back up to my schedule. One of those includes the book club read, which is The Sea by Iris Murdoch, which I don't yet have, but I need to get because the book club discussion is due on March 25th. For Man Booker books, I read a lot in March. I read Holiday by Stanley Middleton. I did read The Sea by Iris Murdoch, which was a book club read. And I also read Seville by David Story, Eden Dust by Ruth Power Javala. The only one that I'm missing from here is Staying On by Paul Scott, which I also read, but I got an electronic download from my library because I didn't end up buying that book yet. But it was interesting. I think I prefer reading the Man Booker books as printed books instead of electronic versions, just because the books themselves are so old and it feels like reading in electronic format kind of pulls me out of the book in some way. In any case, I read it. We'll talk a little bit more about my experience of reading it later. So yeah, all my Man Booker books that I wanted to read in March, I read. So that's a win because I've told you that list now for 2 months and I made absolutely no progress on it in February. I did make some progress on my NetGalley purge. I read 3 NetGalley arcs in March. I read The Truth About Parallel Lines by Jewel D. Block. I read Once Upon a River by Dan Setterfeld. And I read Me For You by Lolly Winston. So I didn't read all the NetGalley books that I wanted, but I read some, so that's a win. One more book that I started in February, didn't get very far, I want to read in March just because it's so important, and that is James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain, I didn't read in March. Somehow I forgot that I was in the middle of reading it, so I think I'm gonna have to start it again, but and I didn't put it on my April TBR, so I don't know. I need to read this book. I'm gonna read it sometime soon. And so that's my March TBR revisit. I actually don't know how many books I ended up mentioning in that video because some of them I call them possibles, some of them I call them definites, and they ended up not being possibles or definites. Some of them I didn't touch at all. There were quite a few books that I started, didn't finish. I don't know how to rank those. So we'll just say that my March TBR, I read some of the books that I planned, and some of the books that I'd planned I didn't, and I'm fine with that. So let me know in the comments down below how successful you were with your March TBR, whether you stuck to your reading plans or if you found yourself gravitating towards books that you hadn't even thought about at the beginning of the month, and what that was like for you. Do you prefer it that way? So thanks for watching this video. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and let's talk down in the comments. So until next time, happy reading. Bye.